Yo, how do I deal damage as Affliction, man?
Use that dot, man.
Oh. Like this dot?
Not that one.
Oh, this one then.
Dude, you're doing it wrong.
How about this?
Hell no.
Well, they're all on the target now, man.
Ah, then you're good, man.
Oh well, I guess all that's left now are the talents, gear, assets in rotation, and some stuff more. So, basically everything. So stay tuned. But before staying tuned, click that bell thingy. Thank you. The talent build is fairly standard until 8.3, where we get to test the new talents being buffed. Also, the video will cover all the fundamentals you will need to pick up your Affliction and start raiding and pushing keys. There are online sources that go into the nitty-gritty bits, which we will check a bit later in the video. First row, take Death Bolt. Until 8.3, am I right? Well, I hope I am. Death Bolt right now is performing the best out of all the three options and might still be competitive in the next raid tier. Death Bolt essentially deals damage equal to a percentage of the total damage remaining from all of your dots on the target at the moment of casting. The usage might seem more complicated on paper, so we will go over more in the rotation section. Until then, go on the second row and pick Siphon Life. For raiding at least. It's an extra dot for you to play with, which deals damage of course and contributes to Death Bolt damage and also heals you, adding to the Warlock sustain that other classes envy so much and arena players hate with the same passion. The Mythics alternative that seems to perform the best at super high levels is Absolute Corruption. This one makes your corruption last indefinitely on the targets, meaning you will cast fewer globals during a fight, which is definitely necessary to be able to dot every single mob in those large packs, which will happen in higher keys. There might be a place for Writhe in Agony if you have the 3 Agony traits, but they perform weaker than what you would normally want, and as such, Writhe in Agony isn't used as much as in previous seasons. Third row will give you survivability and mobility talents. Burning Rush will be the default choice. Affliction is the most mobile spec of the Warlock since most of your spells are instant cast and you can move during that time. Even so, when something happens and you need to move, you need Burning Rush. On-demand sprint might eat a bit of your HP, but with enough gear and dots on the boss, the damage will be mitigated by your self-sustain. Can also be used in certain dungeons where you need to quickly get from one corner of a boss room to another. Otherwise, Demon Skin will be the best alternative. It makes you super tanky, very unlikely to die to mandatory group damage, which usually happens more in Mythics and is deadlier there, specifically on certain affixes. Row 4 brings only one good option, it being Phantom Singularity. We can only hope that this and similar other rows will be addressed by the devs in the future, because really, I don't even know what else is on there unless I open my talents page. Singularity is the best single and multi-target option on the row, probably the strongest dot you can apply with one GCD, and the way Affliction plays, the more dots you have, the better. Fifth row is another utility row, mostly aimed at crowd control. The default option is Demonic Circle, functioning particularly good in raids since the encounters are more consistent and you know where you can put it down and dodge potential shit. Works in dungeons as well, don't get me wrong, but Mythics are a bit more chaotic and as such have more situations where you can diversify. Mortal Coil is the most popular choice, it seems, on super high keys though. And listen, this is a dangerous spell to use if you don't know what you're doing and your group is also unaware, because you could send the mob into another pack pulling extra shit. On the flip side, it's a guaranteed interrupt on trash that are not immune to this horror effect and also immune to interrupts, and basically does what outlaw rogues do with Gauge, only a bit worse because every spec is worse than outlaw in dungeons. The safer one to take is Dark Fury as well, although with the current meta, there are so many AoE stuns in popular groups that reducing the cooldown of yours will not be that instrumental unless you are that weird little cookie that runs mythics without a monk and a demon hunter. The 6th row is again a no options given row, with Haunt taking the cake. Man, all this talk about pastry gives me some cravings. I'ma go eat some pussy. Haunt is essentially a castable taunt that can have 100% uptime since its cooldown is a bit shorter than its duration, and also buffs all your other dots on the target, meaning you'll have crazy priority damage. Last row, same as before, take Dark Soul Misery as the only viable option. I'm telling you right now, the devs need to get their shit together and stop nerfing talents and buff the ones that are gimping our DPS. Who's with me? Dark Soul gives you a Bloodlust for 20 seconds on top of whatever else you got going on, and Haste makes your dots tick faster, and you can chain cast those unstable afflictions like no other. Welcome to BFA, the place where you don't know if a drop is actually good because most things are different colored stat sticks that need to be simulated. Yep, for all your needs, stats, gear, and otherwise, sim your character today. Otherwise, you can stick with the community general accepted stat priority, which sees haste on top, followed by crit and versatility with intellect. Fuck is intellect, man? The strength of these will change, but never so much where you will be hurt by stacking one more than the other, although you will not be getting the 100% out of your lock that way. As an example of how stats can change in strength, these are mine, and they look a tad different. I have 1% versatility, which should say pretty much everything there is to say, and I'm also stacking heavy levels of haste and crit. Usually those come in the forms of trinkets and traits and essences. As far as trinkets are concerned, I actually have 0 of the best in slot ones, the first of which is Ajara's Font of Power from the Queen herself. This one is a channeled effect, where you get thousands of intellect points by finishing the channel for extra seconds for the duration. You want to use this before pulls, or during downtime between boss phases, or when you can afford 4 seconds of doing 0 damage. Next on the list is Leviathan's Lure from the Big Fish in the Water Boss. This has very high proc chance and ends up dealing massive amounts of damage specifically for haste-orientated casters like Affliction. If you are focused mostly on dungeons and cannot farm the raid trinkets, which you should, then you can opt for standard stat sticks or even go for the Mechagon trinket with a Cyclotronic Blast punch card as simple, pure, raw damage. As for the traits, Racking Brilliance seems to pull ahead of most, and you can and should stack this 3 times. The higher your haste levels, the more ticks Agony does and the more shards it generates, meaning the more procs you get out of this one. This works amazing in raids and in dungeons. The other ones are Cascading Calamity and Inevitable Demise, which are also good when stacked and change your rotation approach slightly. I would recommend choosing only one of these two to stack, since the strength of them is more efficiently exploited when stacked. If you have one Cascading Calamity, it's good to refresh Affliction before it's dropping, but not amazingly good where you can prioritize it. If you have one Inevitable Demise, it's good to cast Drain Life at over 40 stacks, but not so impactful where you could forego more important actions. This wishy-washy priority for them will just make you take the bad decisions sometimes, so I say go hard or go home. For secondary traits, Overwhelming Power is a no-brainer. The haste levels are ridiculous, and yeah, if you haven't heard, haste is good for Affliction. Resounding Protection is also pretty sick since it stacks with your baseline Absorb Shield, making Warlocks the tankiest DPS in the game. Almost, I think. Is it though? In any case, it scales with versatility, and if you aren't a dum-dum like me with 1% versatility, you will get a lot out of this one. The essences are a bit simpler than most other specs. Keep in mind that what we will recommend assumes you have them at rank 3. If you don't, replace them with whatever rank 3 you have, or just keep in mind that they won't perform as well until you upgrade them. Also, these are not the only builds you can use, just the ones we recommend. For raiding, surprise surprise, use Condensed Life Force. Rank 3 adds a boost to haste and, well, we talked about this already. Your minors can be Essence of the Focusing Iris because haste, and Crucible of Flame that adds a very strong dot at rank 3 on your targets. In dungeons, you can take your raid build if you want to melt bosses, and I'm saying this because 1, it's easy to do if you're already raiding, and 2, there are a few top Affliction Warlocks actually pushing keys with it. If not, you can definitely switch the classic Essence of the Focusing Iris Major for burst AoE scenarios, which Affliction seems to lack in my opinion. Your minors can be Crucible and Condensed Life Force, so really, you only need the 3 most easiest to come by essences in the game for one of the strongest casters in the game. Isn't that nice for you? You can catch us play different builds and different specs on our stream where we go in keys and raids with you guys on EU and North America as well. Twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline is the name of the game. When opening in single target, you pre-pot and pre-cast Haunt before the pool. Apply Agony first, then Corruption, Siphon Life, and pop your Essence. Use Phantom Singularity and Dark Soul with Racials and Trinkets. Spam Unstable Affliction until you run out of shards, then summon the Dark Glare and Death Bolt. This rotation maximizes the efficiency of Death Bolt, which also synergizes with making Dark Glare efficient, meaning extending as many of your dots by as many seconds as possible. When choosing which spell to cast with priority over others, Agony and Corruption are the most important ones to have up, followed by Siphon Life. Use Dark Soul with as many shards as you can spare for Unstable Afflictions, and even better if you can pair it with Dark Glare. Use Unstable Affliction to prevent capping on shards, cast Haunt on cooldown, cast Phantom Singularity on cooldown, cast Death Bolt on cooldown, but try to fit it in with an Unstable Affliction just before it's available. Use Shadow Bolt as a filler. Dark Soul and Dark Glare have different cooldowns, so it will be hard to always pair them up, and for most of the cases it factors in your fight duration. If it's less than 6 minutes as an example, you will not waste any casts if you pair them up. If not, you can cast them on cooldown, especially if delaying them risks you not using one because the fight ended too quickly. This is a bit more niche and you might need experience and multiple runs to get a feel as to how long the fight will last. If that's too much management, just cast them on cooldown. For both cooldowns and Death Bolt, it's sometimes better to pull a few shards when you see they are close to coming off cooldown, so you can have a bunch of Unstable Afflictions ready when the time comes. When in AoE, dungeons or otherwise, try to maintain Agony on as many targets as you can, and if there are 3 or more stacked, apply Corruption with Seed of Corruption instead. When fighting packs larger than 5 mobs, spend shards on Seed of Corruption. Otherwise, prevent capping shards with Unstable Affliction. Cast Phantom Singularity on cooldown, and apply Unstable Affliction to each target as possible and fill in with Shadow Bolts. The AoE rotation seems to have more versatility to it based on your gear, the pool your tank made, the level of your key, or how tough the mobs are in general. Affliction does not have full control over shard generation since it's random and Agony basically is the only generator. You can increase the chance of generating them with haste, however. Also, using Agony on multiple targets will not multiplicatively increase your shard generation since there's a diminishing return in place. Almost every class that can apply a dot to a target can also play the pandemic mechanic. This refers to the point where you refresh your dot with a few seconds remaining and having those seconds added on top of the normal duration, as opposed to simply replacing that dot with your new one and losing those leftover seconds. For Affliction, that happens at around 5 seconds left, or when the dot has less than 30% of its normal duration left. This is important because it gives you a window to refresh the dots without having to let them drop off to not waste the damage and or losing you DPS if you refresh them too soon. Agony, for instance, is a prime example of a dot you don't want to drop because you will lose the accumulated stacks, since Agony does the most damage once it reaches the 10 stacks, usually falling off shortly after if not refreshed. The consumables have more to do with your 3 main stats, and my suggestion is to use the ones of which stat you have less of. As a default, we will be recommending the ones for haste as examples. A Cord of Haste and Quicksand Spindle are the first and easiest to get. Although you do want one Leviathan's Eye of Intellect, since the raw amount of intellect is better even if this particular stat is weaker than the rest. Machinist's Brilliance will be your weapon's choice, since it procs with your highest stat that can be any of the 3 mentioned before. Greater Flask of Intellect is pretty obvious, although for maximum single target DPS, take Potion of Unbridled Fury, otherwise Potion of Superior Intellect will do just fine. As for the food, just go with baked potatoes, or the equivalent stat giving one, since the feast doesn't give enough intellect to be better than the haste you gain otherwise. All of this information is just to get you started doing tougher and tougher content, like maybe pushing higher keys or going into mythic raiding, right? And for those, I actually recommend a couple of online sources that go more in depth in the Affliction Warlock, and they are made by really more experienced warlocks than we are, and one of the prime examples is the Council of the Black Harvest. Well, pretty much all of the sources are condensed and you can get to each one from that one Discord channel. So check it out, and shout out to all of you top warlocks there. Thank you for providing a lot of information that we use in our guides. We really do want to thank our patrons. Guys, we do say this every time, but yeah, we really appreciate what you guys are doing. We really appreciate you supporting us. It means a lot to us. It actually helps us and give us confidence that what we're doing here actually matters. You guys like it, and we will definitely continue doing it. And hey, maybe Affliction is not your jam, for which we have other guides out there like Destro Warlock already up, and you can check that as well on our channel, and many other spec guides. And thank you for watching the video. Have a good one, and see you next time.